incredibly important. When my younger prosecutors see the way that I prepare for a case, they think I'm slightly crazy because I absolutely have to cover every single portion of the case. I have to visit the crime scene. I have to meet with all the witnesses. I have to prep them all. I have to prep all the cops. I have to review all the evidence. I have to know everything about the defendant's families, the defendant's friends. I need to know everything about the case. And then my preparation for actually trying the case and investigating the case covers everything. So preparation's a huge issue. Organization is a huge issue. And then people don't usually realize it when they meet me, but I didn't come from a background where we had a lot of money. I grew up in a family of 6 kids, and when I was growing up, at least when my older sister and I were the ones growing up, we were the poor family. My middle brothers grew up, and they were the middle-class family. My baby sister grew up, and she was the rich family as my parents moved up. But because of that, it really lets me relate to people at sort of all levels of the socioeconomic spectrum. I'm perfectly happy talking to a corporate executive. I'm perfectly happy talking to some guy who's living on the street. I can talk to both of them. Everybody will be able to understand me. Everybody understands where I'm coming from and responds to it.
And that, of course, helps you with your job, because I see some people that are good at their jobs but can't relate to people, and they don't see that as a barrier, you know.
Yeah, you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't relate to people as a prosecutor, you can't do your job. You've got to be able to understand the witnesses, the victims. You've got to be able to understand the defendant, why he did what he did and what he was thinking. And you have to be able to convince 12 people to agree on something. I mean, think about anything you do, Mark. Take 12 people off the street, try to get them to agree on anything.
Anything. It's impossible.
And we have to get 12 people to agree beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant committed a crime.
Have you ever had a case where somebody was guilty in the eyes of the law, but you didn't feel they were a bad person?
Sure. And that's one of the things that we tell our young prosecutors is one of the major points of your discretion as a prosecutor. You need to differentiate between true evil, and true evil's got to be crushed. That's why we give them the awesome powers we give them. We give them the power to arrest. We give them the power to convict. We give them the power to send people to jail. Those are awesome powers. You should only use those awesome powers against evil. And you need to differentiate people who might have a mental health problem, people who just did something monumentally stupid, people who might have addiction issues. Those people you need to treat differently. You need to get them help. You need to get them treatment. You need to get them rehabilitation, and you need to get them back into a normal life.
That would change the entire justice system, what you said right there. If there was just a separate thing for people that did things that were monumentally stupid, if that were a separate category, and you just had some kind of drive-through where you could just, because I know so many people who have fallen into the category of monumentally stupid but not evil. And the mental health thing you said is just incredible. They have more and more people are getting pressed into the criminal system because the mental health system isn't sustaining them the right way. And they get, and in some places it's changing around that to get into the mental health system, you have to go through the criminal system, create an extra burden there, which is, we've got between, I had a guest from down where you are, with autism, they're going to have, I forget the exact numbers. It was something like 20 years ago, it was 1 in 2,300. It's 1 in 43 now or something. And they expect by 2020, one survey says it could be 1 in 2 people born on the spectrum.
Oh, yeah. And it'd be interesting to figure out why that is. But that collision between mental health and criminal law is fascinating because 20, 30 years ago, you still had a lot of mental health facilities, long-term mental health facilities. And we went to this model where they essentially emptied them out. They did not want people in long-term mental health facilities anymore. And as a result, those people are now addressed almost solely through the criminal law system. because they are sleeping on the street, they're stealing here and there, they're getting into fights, and the only treatment they're getting is in prison. And that's a system that needs to be changed, because there are a lot of those folks that would never end up in prison if they were getting decent mental health care.
Yeah, there's a lot of places that shut down, where you are, Chester County, Pennhurst being one, but that was mostly for younger people. But a lot of the places were shut down because it was cruel. And then here we are 20 years later, they're in another cruel system that, it's just the way it's happening.
And Pennhurst certainly had its problems.
Yes, it did.
It was not
I'm not defending
facility.
Pennhurst. I'm not defending Pennhurst.
Yes, I mean, for all of those people who said we can't have people in these long-term mental health facilities because it is cruel and unusual.
They had no plan.
They had no plan, and now those people are in prison. And that's a heck of a lot more cruel and unusual than a mental health facility.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to mention the burden it puts on law enforcement and having to deal with the person and figure them out, how to interact with them, because it's even at the facility. I've worked in a mental health facility. It's difficult, even if you're tuned into that all day, and you get to a point where you just assume everybody has a problem until they prove otherwise to me. I used to be the other way, and then I flipped when I was working there.
Well, and our police officers have gotten much better over the years at learning by necessity how to deal with mental health problems, just like they've had to learn how to deal with addiction issues. Because our police officers now, it used to be, they were out there to patrol, they were out there to enforce the law and to arrest the bad guys. Well, now it seems like our police officers not only have to do all those things, but they have to be social workers, they have to be parents, they have to be skilled in a whole bunch of different medical fields. So the job of a police officer has evolved over the years.
It's got a lot of social service components in it that just aren't thought about. The person I was talking about before with the autism, he had a situation where his son was in the yard. Police were looking for somebody serving a warrant, mistook his son for him. His son couldn't comply, and there was a big confusion because of that. And we were talking about, some kind of autism registry with the police and different things you could do. Because what's going to happen is that since that ailment doesn't diminish somebody's lifespan at all, once their caregivers pass away, their parents or whomever, they're going to be left on society to take care of them. And if that number does go to anywhere, higher than it is now, it's going to create a tremendous burden. It's going to make things like dementia seem like nothing.
That certainly will be a problem. We did have a case not too long ago where we had an autistic child who was a witness to a violent crime. And I remember the detectives on the case saying, I'm not sure how this child is going to do it, being able to recall and recount what happened. And I said, this child, where they are on the autism spectrum, is going to make a fabulous witness, because this child and the autism issues is a child who actually sees and recalls everything. And when we interviewed the child was able to give us a huge amount of absolutely correct detail, and even explain to us some things that we could not see and did not understand from some of the video we had from the street about what was happening. And so this autistic child turned out to be an unbelievably good witness, and a witness that will essentially be impossible to cross-examine, because the defense lawyer is just going to be like, wow, that's all correct. What can I say?
And not any question about intention or anything either.
No, absolutely not. Just recounted exactly what the child saw and heard to us.
There you go. Autism is the perfect witness, How has technology impacted your job? How do you see it? Does it make on average, your day easier, harder? Do you process, do you have issues with crimes, internet crimes? Does that come in front of your office that often?
Sure. And this is the way technology has worked ever since probably the wheel was invented, which is there'll be a new piece of technology. Bad guys will look at it and think, how can we use this technology to commit crimes? And then the good guys are going to look at it and ask themselves two things. One, how are the bad guys going to use this to commit crimes? Two, how can we turn it on them to help prove that they committed these crimes? So think about cell phones. Cell phones all of a sudden allowed these bad guys to obviously communicate with each other. And what did we figure out we could do? Well, one, we could wiretap the cell phones and listen to what the bad guys were saying to each other about the crimes they were going to commit. Two, we could pull up their phone records and see how much they were talking to each other about the crimes they were going to commit. Three, now with cell towers, we can actually zoom in and figure out not only where they are right now, but where they were a month ago committing a crime. So whatever the technology is, it has always followed that same arc. Bad guys figure out how to use them for crimes. We figure out how to use them to convict bad guys of committing crimes.
Oh, that's good. In search and rescue, we've seen technology impact things. My fear with technology is that sometimes we get seduced by it too quickly and we become dependent on it. And old skills fall by the wayside. And I get real, we'll have a case and they'll say, well, we had the helicopter over and we did the thermal imaging and we're tracking the phone and everything. And I have to remind people with the phones a lot of times, then what you may find is the phone. It doesn't guarantee you'll find the person. And I like technology. I just don't like to be dependent on it. And you just got to keep ahead of it.
Very interesting study recently showing that our consistent use of GPS is interfering with our ability to navigate on our own because we no longer are automatically. I mean, when I was growing up, you'd walk outside in a new place. You'd immediately figure out which way was north, south, east, and west, and then you'd start orienting yourself on landmarks. And kids these days don't do that. They need to get someplace. They just plug it into their phone or their GPS in their cars. And I don't care if the phone or the GPS is telling them to drive off a cliff. They're going to do it. There was a guy in Iceland who actually went 8 hours out of his way because he was following his GPS, which was going directly the wrong direction. And when he finally showed up and checked with somebody, because of course he was a guy, he refused to stop and ask for directions. They were said, "You're on the wrong end of Iceland."
I consider myself pretty stubborn, but I don't think I'm 8 hours stubborn. I'm like half-hour stubborn, maybe. I had pulled over. So on a Friday night in the county, I pulled over because there was a car stopped in the middle of nowhere. And it was just an unusual place for it to be stopped. And there was a girl in the car, and she was crying. I said, "You okay?" She said, "No." And I said, "What's wrong?" She said her GPS wasn't getting a signal, and she didn't know how to get where she was going. And, I feigned sympathy. And then I said, "Okay, where are you going?" And she told me. I said, let's look at it. It's right up here. You go up here, and you drive half mile. You'll see a church. You turn a right. And I realized I might as well just been going wah, 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 because it wasn't getting. And then I said, "I'll write it down for you," which wasn't working because she didn't seem to get that. And thankfully, the GPS signal came back and her tears dried up and all was right in the world. But she could have starved to death there. She could have starved to death there. We had a case. I just remember this. We had a case where the person was missing and their car broke down. And they didn't know where they were, but they called in. And so it was, you had to, you're using sirens on vehicles to figure out where they are. They're on a street. They're on a residential street. They're not in the middle of nowhere. Get out of the car, walk to that traffic light, find an adult, And this was like a 19-year-old person or something like that. So that whole thing you're saying about our ability going, it's gone. It's gone. And I used to, slam people for it. But in all honesty, I haven't remembered a cell phone number or a phone